Hi, everyone, and welcome to Decoding Destiny, sound bites from the C-suite. Join me every week as I capture strategies from incredibly successful women and share these sound bites to help you decode challenges and map your own destiny. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and on whatever app you use to listen to podcasts. Today, I am meeting with Eugina Jordan and discussing how to reprogram yourself in the workplace to adapt to cultural differences. In a world where borders have been blurred and people are working together from all parts of the globe, it is so important to be aware of cultural norms that maybe don't align with the norms we might be used to. So we'll discuss how to adapt without losing your mojo. Eugina is a self-made immigrant woman who started her telecom career as a secretary and now has gone on to become VP of marketing, one of the major telecom industry disruptors, Parallel Wireless. She has over 20 years of strategic marketing experience, leading marketing and communications teams for small and large global tech companies. She's also an inventor, holding 6 patents that include 5G and Open RAN. Her passion is to help other women in telecom to realize their full potential through mentorships, community engagements, and workshops. Her story is a positive example that if you work hard, play fair, continue to learn, and always believe in yourself, you can grow yourself, your career, and help others. Welcome, Eugina.
Thank you so much, Irina. It's such a pleasure to be here. I love the mission of this podcast, and I was so excited when you reached out to do it. So
Oh, I'm
let's get to it.
so excited to have you on. This is an awesome topic, and I think it touches on everyone. And like I said in the intro, whether you come from another country and you're relocating to somewhere else here in the United States, anywhere else talking about here just because we're here, but or you're working with others in other countries, it's so important to understand these cultural differences, to really be able to break down those barriers to create collaboration and communication. But before we go into it too much, I'd love to learn more about your background. I think that you have a super interesting story, and tell us how you went from secretary to VP of marketing, and a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. I believe that my story is bigger than me. So the story, I hope my story will inspire other women. So I was born in Russia, in communist Russia. And in 1991, when Gorbachev was trying to be removed from his power by the Communist Party, my mom realized that we need to leave Russia. She wanted her daughters, I have a twin sister, to leave Russia. She told us that night when tanks were flooding Moscow, and I heard the scraping metal on the pavement, she said to us the words that stayed with me forever. She said, "You deserve better." And I finished college in Russia. I got a master's degree in teaching. And then we found a program, my sister and I, to move to Canada. And this is where I started my journey, learning about different cultures. I remember going to a store and asking for tomato paste. And they were taking me to an aisle where there was pasta. So this is how I first experienced misunderstanding. And I was looking at them and they were looking at me, and I'm like, no, I want paste. And they're like, yeah, pasta, pasta. So, and this was the first example of different cultures. So the 6 years I spent in Canada, I met wonderful friends. I'm still friends with them 25 years later. And they spend their time to teach me about Canadian culture, to show me what I was doing wrong, where I was stepping on people's toes. And they invested, Michelle, my best friend of 25 years from Canada, she invested her time in helping this awkward Russian girl to become better, because she's just like my mom believed I deserved better. So my life in Canada was going great. I was turning 30. I felt my biological clock was ticking. I found an American and I moved to the United States in 2000. So we know what happened in 2000, right? The dot-com boom. I couldn't get a job. I had a degree, master's in teaching, and then I had a computer undergrad from Canada. I couldn't get a job. My mom was in Canada. I had to support her. So I went to a tiny little startup to interview for a job as a receptionist. And the CEO of that company, Ash Tahod, he saw something in me. So he became my second mentor after Michelle, mentor and a sponsor. So he hired me because he saw tiny little fire in my belly. And 6 years later, when I was getting a divorce and I was becoming a single parent, I realized that I wanted bigger. I wanted bigger. I wanted to have the bigger dreams. I wanted to be like Ash. And I had to start somewhere. There was an opening in marketing. I went to Ash and I asked for a transfer. And he said the words that I remember as well. He said, I cannot hold you back. I hate losing you, but you want to grow. And he let me. I transferred into marketing. Then we went public, Starent went public. Then we got acquired by Cisco, 5 years at Cisco. You take a girl out of a startup, you cannot take a startup out of a girl. I meet Steve Papa, wonderful human being. He's actually became my next mentor. And it was a wonderful experience at Parallel Wireless, where I started as a director and worked extremely hard to prove to him, the company, that I can go into C-suite. And it took a lot of working on myself and taking Russia out of the girl, so I don't show up insecure to the C-suite or as a victim or as manipulative. And I'm very grateful to Steve and Keith because they took the time to invest and show what cultural differences we have in this country and how I need to adjust. And then I started reading Hofstede Insights and Understanding. And then I became a biggest advocate of cultural differences in my company because it's not us versus them, never is. It's us understanding them. Why? So, and this is what I am teaching people, that if someone tells you something and it might sound like they're judging you, don't go in that bad place. Ask why. When I was told, you sound manipulative, Eugina, I asked why. But about enough talking, we can go into, so this is my basic story.
I think that you do bring something up that's really critical to note, that neither side is right or wrong. It's a cultural norm. There's no right or wrong. It's to the eye of the beholder, right? Whoever sees it that way isn't looking at it the right way. It's how do we find a way to communicate and collaborate together so that we can break down all of those misunderstandings that could be there just because of what I'm programmed to know as a norm and what you're programmed to know as a norm. So there are probably many things that you saw in culture, whether that be Canada or America, that you were like, this is crazy, this is weird, this is different. And it goes both ways. So I think, it's important to note that it does go both ways, and it's just about finding that middle ground. So when you were and you've been in the workplace, what are some of the challenges specifically that you did face that you had to overcome? Maybe some examples of things that you went through that you can talk about with the audience.
Absolutely 100% when you said that there are differences between Canadian or American culture. It's about being vulnerable. Us Russians, we don't share. We've lived such a hard life throughout wars and throughout gulags. We don't share personal information. And Americans or Canadians, my friend Michelle, the first day we met, she was talking to me about her divorce and her ex-husband and this and that. And I was like, whoa, to me, it was so weird because she was being vulnerable with me. And it took me a lot of effort and time to start being vulnerable. So that's the biggest challenge. And I had to overcome, because if you're not being vulnerable, you cannot build relationships.
Very true.
So, and this is what I learned, that it's okay to be vulnerable, and I can share what I'm comfortable with sharing. And it's opening up just tiny little bit, taking those chances, being courageous, and doing it with people that you trust.
Which takes time, because vulnerability is scary for a lot of people, because you are kind of putting yourself out there, and there's that risk of judgment, rejection, scrutiny, whatever. And so, you have to take those baby steps and kind of figure out that, make sure you're doing it with the right people.
Absolutely. And trust is that comparison from Brené Brown, the marble jar, right? So trust takes time. And it is hard. It takes a lot of courage to open up and tell them your story. But it also comes with owning your story. So, and being vulnerable, it's very hard for many cultures. It's hard for cultures that, and people need to know, because if you work with employees on in those cultures, they might not tell you that their baby is sick. They might not tell you that their mother is sick. And what's going on right now in India, managers that are based in the US, they need to make an extra step.
Sure.
They need to be open, and they need to open the door for those people to be vulnerable and say that, yes, I need some time off to take care of my family. Because those cultures, like Russian culture, we're not going to volunteer this information unless managers, leaders, they create a self-conversational environment.
Another thing is authority. I think that different cultures look at authority figures very differently. There are certain cultures, and I think, that just will not challenge authority, which is actually very debilitating to a team that you want to kind of expand horizons and get new ideas. And there are others that will constantly challenge authority. And if you're on the other side of it thinking, wait a minute, this is the hierarchy, where are you, coming at me with this? That can be very disconcerting too. So authority is another big one that I think, from a workplace standpoint, can change the team dynamic dramatically.
Absolutely. And when I was talking earlier about people calling American managers, calling me manipulative, this is where it comes from. So if we look at Hofstede index, there is power of authority. So if we compare Russians and Americans, we're at like 95%. So we cannot go into our president's office or into our manager's office and say, you are wrong. Or let me give you an idea. We cannot do that. So for me to talk to my manager, I had to go around and mitigate my language and find different way to say, or maybe to an American who can go into the president's office and say, you are wrong. It looked like I was manipulative.
Yep.
And it created a weird dynamic.
And it was just a complete misunderstanding and miscommunication.
Absolutely. So what I did, I asked, why are you calling me manipulative? Oh, and the answer was, because you never get to a point. You have to give a long explanation. So I had to look deep inside myself to realize why and work on it. And there was a meeting maybe 6 months ago when my boss was proposing an idea, and I went into my mode of going around, and I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I said, is it possible that you might be wrong? And my stomach dropped, because again, when you grew up a certain way, you still have those fears.
Of course.
You still get scared, right? Oh my God, right? And my boss said, you know what, Eugina, you're bringing up a valid point, because you're giving me a different perspective. So let's, as a team, work and see if there's another alternative. And there was.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And I think that overcoming that fear is always going to, I think, be there in some way, shape, or form. And it may get less and less as you try different tactics. But how do you reprogram yourself without losing yourself? Because there's a difference. You can reprogram to adapt, and then you can reprogram and just take away that essence of who you are, which is also really important to keep.
That is such a great question, because as women in C-suite, and in my case in telecom, we're told how to act. We're told how to wear, what to say. Also, immigrant women like me, we rarely represented in a C-suite. It's thought only that immigrant women are good for certain jobs. And reprogramming yourself is taking a hard look at your own values, what your values are. And mine are courage. Despite growing up in Russia and being oppressed by the regime, communist regime, I knew I deserved better, as my mom said, and it took courage. So it's realizing what I'm willing to compromise on. And I am willing to compromise on is taking the feedback.
Mhm.
And looking at that feedback and seeing, is it going to help me to become better? And that's not compromise, that's growth.
100%.
So
Really.
if that, yeah. So if that feedback helps me grow, then I'm going to change. But if someone doesn't like my Russian accent, or if they say, oh, you're too loud, Eugina, or your pink shoes are too sparkly, that's how I express myself.
Yes. It's also knowing your boundaries, right? Knowing where you're willing to change, and then knowing what you're not going to change because it really shouldn't affect something one way or the other. So I think always having that positive spin of, even when I am changing, it's because I'm growing, it's because I'm developing, it's because I'm expanding, is good. But also to know where that boundary line is so that no one
Yeah,
takes advantage.
absolutely. And also, my area of growth was mostly around how I treated other people. And I'm going to be very vulnerable right now, and it's hard. So early in my career, I was told by people that I leave bodies behind me, that I don't care how people feel. And it was a very hard feedback to take. And to this day, I'm working on being an empathetic leader. Because again, in Russia, we do what is told. We don't care how people feel.
Mhm.
We don't cry. So, and realizing that I need to adjust, because we work with humans, we work with people, we work with uh, people that struggle every day, and we don't see those struggles. So this is another area that I had to change myself without losing me. And that was an important one.
Thank you for sharing that, by the way. It's interesting because I had the opposite problem. Um, I was told that I was too empathetic with my team, that I was too connected to them personally, not personally as friends, but too connected to them emotionally, I guess is a better way of saying it. And I'm not seeing um, the negative, which I took the advice because maybe that's how it looked to the outside world. Um, but my rationale was these are human beings that are working with me, that are reporting to me, that depend on me, that I am their shield and I want to protect them. And when you deserve that protection because you show that you can do and that you're continuing to work hard and that you're continuously raising the bar for yourself, you deserve that. So I took the feedback and appreciated it because I think although for the team that I had, I was so proud of and so, excited about and worked so well with, it did though make me change a little bit in the way that maybe I highlighted the team or spoke about the team to other people because then I was just I put more logic than emotion into that to be able to prove this is why they're great versus I love my team. And I think sometimes you have to balance both the logic and the emotion to be able to say, well, I love my team because we just beat last quarter's numbers. We are continuing to do X, Y, Z. Now, balancing the emotion with the stats and the logic now I think is a more well-rounded picture, right?
So it sounds like you changed the way you communicated, not how you took care of your team.
No, that wouldn't change because I also think that that's part of my essence is how I look at people that I work with and that are my team and that I trust and that work well together. So that couldn't change, but it's how I communicated that to the rest of the group that changed. And I realized that needed to change so that it didn't come off as this purely emotional connection to people, but there was a reason behind it, there's a logic behind it.
So, but it's also maybe your upbringing in a Greek family is behind it, right? So the spotlight was on me. Now let's just put spotlight on you as a second generation immigrant, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm first generation on my dad's side, and my mom's side, I'm second generation, and we're very connected to Greece and my culture and my whole upbringing. I mean, I grew up next to my grandparents, and my whole family was very close. And so the Greek culture is very warm and welcoming and loving and caring to strangers as well as family and friends. It's just an open culture that way. And so a lot of that comes from how I was raised. And I realized that some of my managers or coworkers were coming from a very different place. And they were also immigrants from cultures that maybe didn't look at authority the same way. And in their mind, I was an authority because I was the manager. they were my employees, and that there should be a different relationship between manager and employee. So I respected that they looked at it differently, for sure, because I could understand where they were coming from. I didn't necessarily agree that that was my management style. So I tried to find that like middle ground to pull that all together. But I do think that some of the things that you grow up with, being at home or within that cultural environment that you're brought up in, are just a part of you so much that, yes, you have to make adjustments, but it's you. It's still you.
Absolutely. I have a 16-year-old who was born here. He doesn't even speak a word of Russian. Actually, he does. He knows a couple of swear words. He
Of course,
found them.
those are the first ones you learn.
He found them on YouTube, right? So, and because in Russia, we're all about a group of people, just like Greeks and families, and it's us. It's not me, me, me. It's not I. So the ways he might appear to in school or at a workplace, he might appear a little bit weak if he talks about less about him and more about the team. And his employer won't understand it, that he was raised by a Russian mother with the Russian culture. So asking questions and understanding where people are coming from.
Yep.
Who raised them, how they were raised, and why they say certain things or make certain decisions. It is important in our environment.
Well, I think it's also the job and the duty of every manager or leader. It, more than the job itself and the functions you have to perform, it's about truly understanding who are the people that are working for you, how they work best, what makes them, what powers their engine, what demotivates them, and getting to know them on a very deep level, because that's when you can really connect with someone and unlock and unleash their power, right? And you can have them working at an optimal level because they then feel like, I understand why I'm doing this. I understand, my manager, and they get me, and they feel heard and they feel connected. And we all, as human beings, search for that. That's just a natural function of being a human being, regardless of where you're from. Like your son, for example, could be perceived as not someone that should be a leader. He's a team player. And it could be so far from the truth. But unless someone understands that about him, it's, only high level, which a lot of people do when they're in these positions, which is unfortunate. He may not have the chance to prove that.
Yep. Absolutely. You said something very interesting about connection. And during the last year, it became so apparent that we crave that connection. And companies that put emphasis on humans and connecting humans, they thrived.
Yes.
And companies that looked at their people as numbers, they didn't.
No.
And that's why they're talking about the big exodus after COVID. People will always, like Maya Angelou says, people will always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And if you understand, where they from, what motivates them, what upsets them, then you can make those connections, and people will make the effort to become better. Like I did when I was told that I need to take Russia out of me. I didn't take it as a defensive. I took it as someone that was trying to help me become successful, to understand the cultural differences and find bridges between those cultures.
No, for sure. And I think there's also a misconception from leaders and managers that they should be trusted and respected just because of their position. The reality is that trust and respect are earned over time, and you have to do a lot of work to gain that from somebody. And it's your job to do that, because if your team doesn't trust you or respect you, you've failed, no matter what your business function is, no matter what certain goals you had, because no matter what, everybody that's working for you is looking at this as a job. There is no loyalty, there is no trust, and there's no longevity. So anything you're trying to build is weak at the foundation. And if it's weak at the foundation, at some point, it's going to crumble. And it's very true. The people, the most successful companies are the ones that know how to create that trust and loyalty and connection with their employees, because those people want to stay there because of the way they feel, the way they're made to feel, the empowerment that they feel in their role, in their job, and with their coworkers. And you spend too many hours in a day doing a job. You should love it.
And you should love people that you work with,
Yes.
right?
Oh no, most definitely, 100%. What strategies do you think people can implement on both sides? Someone trying to understand, um, someone in another country that they may be managing, or someone in another country that's maybe working with the majority of people here in the US and trying to understand them. What are some strategies that they can do to um, kind of break down those barriers?
So the way I look at it, there are two types of strategies: external ones towards other people, and then internal ones towards yourself. And I believe the foundation is to start with yourself. You cannot lead others. You cannot properly talk to others unless you know how to talk to yourself, how to lead yourself, how to be compassionate to yourself, and the list goes on. So I would recommend taking emotional intelligence classes, reading emotional intelligence books to understand yourself. Brené Brown is wonderful. She was my go-to during COVID, podcasts and her books and her websites. Understanding what triggers you and why. Understanding what you love, what your non-negotiables are, your values. And once you have that foundation of understanding yourself, then you can embrace relationship with others and bring curiosity, asking questions. So that was always my tactic. The biggest tactic to understand another person is to ask an honest question without an agenda, without anything, expecting anything in return, and just go from there.
Yeah, no, that's really true. Eugina, looking back at your life and your career path and kind of the journey that you've been through, what's a piece of advice that you would give to your younger self, knowing what you know today?
Oh, I would say Jaka, that used to be my nickname. Be patient.
Mm,
Be patient. It will all happen when the time is right. Work hard and just be patient.
that's that's a skill that is becoming harder and harder in modern day times to cultivate. So that is very good advice.
And I wish I can give the same advice to my 16-year-old, because I see my teenage self and him. And I'm like, I wish I could give you my brain, and I wish I could make it easier for you, but we can't. Right?
We can't. Eugina, this was extremely, extremely insightful. Thank you so much for sharing, for being vulnerable, for opening up, and for really giving us some actionable tips that I think will help, whether it's, us here in America potentially dealing with folks overseas or someone overseas that's dealing to, regardless of the side that you're on or what part of the globe you're in. These are really helpful tips so that your work can become productive and collaborative, and you don't get stuck in all of the little nuances and misunderstandings. So thanks again, Eugenia. This was great.
Thank you for having me.